And welcome back to the Hot Lap. Coming up in our show, it is race week. George Russell, I promise you, he is better than he's really showing. We even compare George Russell to Lando Norris and Alex Albon. McLaren also teammate trouble, really, this episode, because McLaren are eager to avoid those team orders. And also, has Mercedes lost its race day edge over Ferrari, let's be honest, rather than anybody else? But let's get into this. This is from planetf1.com by Thomas Maher. Apologies, Tom, if I forgot your name. Not forgot, but got your name wrong. Mercedes' decision to replace Bottas with George is under scrutiny. Clickbait, surely. I was really surprised to see this. So it says Russell's move to Mercedes last year has resulted in an imbalance at Mercedes, according to a pundit. I mean, poor George Russell, but everyone is hating him at the moment, aren't they? So, as we know, Russell was called up from Williams to replace Bottas at the end of 2021, with Toto Wolff opting to make the change. But Hamilton, as we know, he's continuing with the sport, signing for another 2 years at the end of this year, and his relationship with Russell is evolving, some may describe. Now, tensions between the pair have been rising, as evidenced by that what I thought was one of the most entertaining things in Suzuka, let's be honest. But Peter Windsor said Mercedes are an imbalanced team. Now, appearing on his own YouTube stream after the Japanese Grand Prix, the former Williams and Ferrari manager, he's asked whether he feels Russell is World Championship level material. And Windsor basically said Russell's arrival at Mercedes has changed the dynamic fundamentally from the more balanced hierarchy that we saw with Hamilton and Bottas. He went on to saying, the point is this should also be seen in the context of Lewis telling Toto endlessly to keep Valtteri. He's exactly the right guy. And Toto saying, no, we've got to have the next generation. Now, George is that next generation and quicker, Windsor said. Can't blame him there. Completely agree with Peter Windsor there. Peter Windsor went on to say, I blame a lot of the press for that, because a lot of them were saying, Valtteri isn't quick enough, George is quicker. And of course, then he won that race. I just come back to my thing of, if you've got Lewis, you don't actually need George. If you've got George, you don't need Lewis. It's an imbalanced team, always has been, always will be, and that is the problem with it. It's interesting. I mean, is it going to be a case of Nico Rosberg versus Lewis? Is it going to be a case of Nico Rosberg versus Lewis Hamilton? Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? To say the least, it's going to be interesting. I mean, here's the three of them now: George Russell, Lando Norris, and Alexander Albon. They were, as we know, all of these guys were together in F2 in 2018. So, who is the best out of the three of them? Many people would suggest it's going to be Lando Norris, wouldn't they? But I mean, let's get all their stats up from their championship. I mean, we got George Russell here, we've got Lando, we got the wonderful Lando Norris here, and then we have the equally wonderful Alex Albon. But who did better? As you can see, George Russell won, Lando Norris finished second, and Alex Albon finished third. It's almost like we did this on purpose. But what's interesting is Russell won with 287 points. He got 7 wins and 5 poles. With Lando Norris, he won the first race, I think, that year in 2018 with 1 win and 1 pole, 219 points. Just finishing second, let's say, because a very close third was Alex Albon with 212 points, 3 wins and 3 pole positions. So, I mean, you've got to start thinking that George, he beat both of them. Formula 2 is a lot more even than Formula 1. Yes, I think it does make a difference what team you're with, but not as much, I believe, as it does with Formula 1. And George trounced a lot of them coming up there, even the wonderful Lando Norris. And one thing I will say about George, as we compare to Lando Norris, is I can't help but feel that George, I think, is more aggressive than Lando, and we've seen that when he when he like really tries to go for it. They look so young there, don't they? But when he tries to, he really goes for it, doesn't he? So it's gonna be interesting. I think Lando is immensely talented, but based on the evidence I've seen on the day, if you want someone to go for that overtake, go for the win, I think George Russell is more your man than Lando Norris. But I'd love to be proven wrong, and I would love a fight. I mean, and even McLaren and even Mercedes for the win, maybe sometime next year to see, just to see exactly what we've got there. And Alex Albon, the phoenix that has risen from the ashes of his Red Bull career, is doing absolutely fantastic. And what a class of F2 in 2018. I mean, it absolutely mega. But before 2017, I think was Leclerc. But 2018, I mean, here we go. This is 2018. George Russell, and obviously Lando Norris and Alex Albon with all their points, and these are all the points they accrued from the 12 races there. Interestingly, there you go, good old Latifi, Mr. Latifi in 9th, Aitken in 11th as well. Fairly recognisable names there. Dan Ticktum in 23rd. I don't think he did too many things. I know Lando Norris also debuted in 2017 as well in Formula 2. But George Russell, as we know, he went to Williams. He ruined Kubica. Whether that was a fair fight or not, I don't know. But then he scored, he helped score, was there, nearly scored Williams' first points, didn't. In the end, he did score points for Williams, and it meant so much for him in that interview when he had that tear in his eye, if you guys remember. And he did gangbusters for Williams, didn't he? And he was Mr. Saturday. He dragged that car in qualifying to places it probably shouldn't be. But everyone is hating on George now for his Singapore mistake. Yes, he made that Singapore mistake. Whoops-a-daisy. Okay, we all make mistakes. Even Perez has come out and had a go at George, saying more people are having a go at me than George Russell. But I pot kettle black, I think, there with Sergio, because he's so far off his teammate. He shouldn't have really said anything. I think there it was a bit embarrassing, that comment, trying to throw the shade on George Russell when you are. Yes, you have the best car and you are holding on, let's say, to second rather than definitely being second in that championship. But there we go. So next up, we've got McLaren. This is from motorsport.com. The headline being basically, if we scroll all the way up, sorry if I'm giving you motion sickness. Now, McLaren are eager to avoid any more Norris Piastri F1 team orders. Now, if you remember in Japan, it was a bit of a hullabaloo with Lando Norris having a moan, let's say. As we know, they had slightly offset strategies. McLaren had to ask Piastri to let Norris through at one point to ensure it didn't race time fighting each other and squandering that double podium. In hindsight, I don't think it would have made a difference. Now, the latest call to get the drivers to help each other came after a similar team order request at Hungary. McLaren boss Andrea Stella has no doubts that the team has done the right thing in swapping its drivers around. And asked if the Japan call compared to those in Hungary, Stella basically said it was much, much easier in a way, as those two situations were stressful, especially the one in Monza. He went on to say, and when I say stressful, I mean stressful because we created stress between our two drivers, which we could have avoided, really. That's something that we reviewed. It may happen again in the future, but when it is avoidable, we should avoid it. In this case, the approach was, let's see how fast Lando is closing, and let's see if the overtaking comes naturally. I mean, there they are there on the podium. Fantastic double podium for Japan. I mean, there's Verstappen there. No doubt he was going to win, let's be fair. But what a podium for McLaren. Still, I went on to say, when we saw that it doesn't come so natural, then we asked the drivers to swap so that we wouldn't lose race time for both. Completely understand. And he went on to say, in a race like this, every lap of tyre that you save, so if you pit one lap later than somebody else, you gain 1/10. He says Lando at that stage pitted 6 laps later, so his car is automatically 6/10 quicker than the other car. Also, in addition, I have to say that Lando's pace was very good in absolute terms, and if anything, we have to look at Oscar, where we could have gained 1 or 2 tenths overall pace that he seemed to lack compared to Lando. But this is a Piastri that turned up at a notoriously difficult circuit in Japan and out-qualified Lando. So fair play to Piastri. I think we gave him one, almost driver of the race up there with Verstappen. I think when you looked at the whole weekend, he came on really, really strong. Doesn't have the experience that Lando has in that McLaren, albeit we are getting towards the end of the year now. And you have to start to wonder whether Piastri is going to cause Lando more headaches. More headlines, maybe. That'd be interesting. But there we go. So Mercedes, and another story on motorsport.com by Jonathan Noble, Mercedes fears it's lost its race day edge. And as we know, Mercedes, especially last year, always was faster than it showed in qualifying. And a lot of the time it's because it was able to look after its tyres more. And that did have an issue for Mercedes sometimes because they couldn't switch the tyres on straight away because they weren't, they were the opposite of overheating their tyres, kind of like the opposite of Haas, where they'll be really good in qualifying, especially in cold conditions, but struggling in the race. Now, the story goes that Mercedes suspects its tyre advantage over main rival Ferrari has been wiped away thanks to the progress the Italian squad has been making. Now, in the early phase of the season, we know that Mercedes had the edge in races because of the tyre offset compared to the Ferrari SF23. However, as we know, Ferrari have made really good gains on understanding, and they understand, I think even more so than last year, why it was so hard on its rubber early on, and naturally its race pace has got quicker. Now the two teams are locked in a fight for runners-up in the Constructors' Championship, and the switch could prove critical. As we know, at the recent Japanese Grand Prix, where tyre degradation was critical in deciding that race, Ferrari showed on top with Charles Leclerc, and they finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton. And that was a result that Mercedes, Andrew Chauvelin proved that Ferrari was no longer behind its management of tyre degradation. He said, I think the performance deficit was there in qualifying, where we have a bit less performance through the fast corners. It's the same that was costing us in the race. So there we go. I mean, I think this track is just about how much grip you've got in fast corners. A lot of that will be downforce, and we think we're a little bit behind in that regard. And then on to say that Ferrari did have an updated floor, so maybe they've moved forward. But he thinks if we look at some of our recent track, the advantage we have with degradation, it's not as evident now as it was in the early races. Now, Fred Vasseur has acknowledged that its squad has made good gains, and Fred Vasseur has come out and said, it's sure if you have a look at the first couple of races of the season, the degradation of the tyre management were not always our biggest skill. And he said, coming to Suzuka with this track temp, we were a bit at risk, but at the end of the day, I think we did a good job on this side. The race was under control, the strategy was well managed, we did well, a clear step forward compared to the first part of the season. So, there we go, that's pretty much the main news for today. It absolutely is race week. There's George Russell. Yes, Marina. Hooray for George. But it is race week. It is Qatar. We'll be getting into it this week. Probably next time we will be looking at the track. We will be looking at the talking points coming in to the weekend. And it's a sprint race weekend. We will have our preview on Thursday, and then our normal review shows Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and all those in between. So stay tuned. Race week, Qatar, the hot lap. Like and subscribe if you can. That would be absolutely fantastic. I would love you guys forever, platonically, of course. If you made it to the end, you are an F1 champion. Comment below. Speak to you soon.